I watched as Morgan Harrison slid the acquisition agreement across the polished mahogany table, his steel-gray eyes never leaving mine. The document was 30 pages of legal language that essentially erased 7 years of my life's work with a single signature. "Go ahead, Ms. Reynolds," he said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "We have a board meeting at 4, and I'd like to wrap this up before then. My name is Vivian Reynolds, and at 34, I was about to sign away Lumentech, the healthcare software company I'd built from nothing in my garage apartment. The company that had just developed a revolutionary patient management system poised to transform hospital efficiency across the country. The same company that Morgan Harrison and Titan Medical Solutions were acquiring for pennies on the dollar. $15 million is generous for an unproven system with no significant market penetration," Morgan added, misreading my hesitation. "Especially considering your situation." My situation was the reason I was sitting in this sterile conference room on the 42nd floor of Titan's headquarters. 3 months ago, my company's primary investor had suddenly pulled out, citing financial restructuring. Without that capital, Lumina would collapse before our software could launch. What Morgan didn't know was that I understood exactly why that investor had abandoned us. Just as I understood why 3 potential new investors had all mysteriously backed out after initial enthusiasm. Information has always been my specialty, after all. 15 million, I repeated quietly, running my finger along the edge of the document. For a system that your own tech team valued at close to 200 million. A flicker of surprise crossed Morgan's face before his practiced smile returned. "We're taking on considerable risk, Ms. Reynolds. Your company is hanging by a thread. A thread you've been methodically cutting for the past 6 months," I said, meeting his gaze. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Morgan's smile vanished. "I'm not sure what you're implying," he said carefully, nodding to his legal team seated along the wall. "But these kinds of baseless accusations could complicate our generous offer." I slid the contract back to my side of the table and reached for my pen. Morgan's posture relaxed slightly. "My apologies," I said. "Pre-signing jitters, I suppose." What Morgan Harrison didn't know about me could fill volumes. He didn't know that before starting Lumina, I'd spent 5 years in corporate intelligence. He didn't know that my roommate from MIT was now a senior cybersecurity analyst for the FBI. And he certainly didn't know about the encrypted drive in my apartment containing every communication between Titan Medical and the investment firms they pressured to abandon Lumina. I signed a contract with a steady hand, ignoring the smug satisfaction emanating from Morgan as he watched my company become his property. "Welcome to Titan Medical Solutions," he said, gathering the signed documents. "Our HR team will contact your staff about the transition." "And my role?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We'll bring you on as a consultant during the integration period. 6 months should be sufficient." Translation: they would extract everything I knew, then discard me. "Of course," I replied with a practiced smile. "I'm looking forward to it." As I left Titan's gleaming skyscraper and stepped into the humid August air, I felt strangely calm. Phase 1 was complete. Morgan Harrison thought he'd won, that he'd successfully orchestrated the hostile takeover of a vulnerable competitor for a fraction of its worth. But the game was just beginning. Morgan Harrison had grown Titan Medical from a modest medical equipment supplier into a healthcare technology giant through a specific pattern. Identify promising startups, systematically isolate them from capital, acquire them at bargain prices, then repackage their innovations as Titan originals. The strategy had made him a billionaire by 45 and earned him the nickname the Vulture of Med Valley. I'd known exactly who I was dealing with when I first met Morgan 3 years ago at a healthcare innovation conference in Boston. He'd approached me after my presentation on Lumina's patient management system, all smiles and flattery. "Impressive work," he'd said, offering his hand. "Morgan Harrison, Titan Medical." "I know who you are," I'd replied, accepting his handshake. "Your reputation precedes you." He'd laughed, taking it as a compliment. "I'd love to discuss potential synergies between our companies sometime." That evening, I'd initiated a comprehensive background investigation into Morgan Harrison and Titan Medical's acquisition history. The pattern was clear: partnership offers followed by systematic dismantling. I decided then that Lumina would never partner with Titan. What I hadn't anticipated was how ruthless Morgan would become once he set his sights on my technology. 2 weeks after signing away Lumina, I began my consulting role at Titan. My new office was a windowless room 4 floors below the executive level, and my access badge restricted me to only a few areas of the building. The message was clear. I was an outsider, tolerated only for my knowledge. Morgan largely ignored me, delegating my integration to a mid-level project manager named David Chen. David was actually decent, one of the few at Titan who seemed to have genuine passion for healthcare improvement rather than just profit margins. "Your system is incredible," David told me one afternoon as I walked him through Lumina's architecture. "The predictive analytics module alone could reduce patient wait times by 30%. Why did you fight harder to stay independent?" I gave him the simplified version: investor problems, capital shortages, market timing. "That's the official story," David said quietly, glancing toward the door. "But there are rumors." "What kind of rumors?" I asked, though I could guess. That Titan deliberately targeted Lumina. That Morgan personally called in favors to block your funding. He hesitated. "It's not the first time." I simply nodded. "Sounds like Titan plays hardball." "Morgan plays hardball," David corrected. "Titan is just his chessboard." Over the next few months, I became the model consultant. I documented everything, trained their developers, answered endless questions about implementation details, and never once complained about being excluded from strategic meetings about my own technology. What Titan didn't realize was that every day I spent inside their walls was another day of gathering evidence. Every restricted server I supposedly couldn't access was another piece of the puzzle. Every dismissive comment from Morgan when we occasionally crossed paths was fuel for what was coming. 4 months into my integration period, I received an unexpected invitation to Morgan's office. His executive assistant led me into his corner suite overlooking the city, where he sat reviewing documents at his desk. "Vivian," he said without looking up, using my first name for the first time. "Have a seat." I sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk, noting the framed magazine covers featuring Morgan's face and the conspicuous absence of family photos. "David tells me the integration is ahead of schedule," he said, finally meeting my gaze. "He speaks very highly of your cooperation." "I want the technology to succeed," I replied. "That was always my goal." Morgan leaned back, studying me. "You've surprised me, I'll admit. Most founders in your position would be bitter, obstructive even." "What would that accomplish?" He smiled slightly. "Nothing. Which is why they fail and I succeed." He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. "I'm accelerating the timeline for Lumina's, Titan Patient Pro's, market launch. The board is very enthusiastic about the projected numbers." "Congratulations," I said. "Though I'm curious why you're telling me this." He turned, his expression calculating. "Because your consulting period will be ending earlier than planned. 2 weeks from today." Despite anticipating this, the timeline caught me by surprise. I'd expected at least another month. "I see," I said carefully. "May I ask why?" "Your work is complete," he said simply. "And frankly, having the original creator around during launch creates complications regarding intellectual property and credit." Translation: Morgan wanted me gone before he could be questioned about Lumina's acquisition. "Of course," I replied. "I understand completely." He seemed almost disappointed by my easy acceptance. "HR will prepare a generous severance package. You've been unexpectedly valuable during this transition." As I stood to leave, Morgan added, "One more thing, Vivian. Your non-compete agreement prevents you from working in healthcare technology for 3 years. I trust you'll honor that commitment." "I always honor my commitments, Morgan," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "You can count on that." 2 weeks later, I cleaned out my temporary office under the watchful eye of a Titan security guard. David helped me carry my few personal items to the elevator. "This isn't right," he muttered as we waited. "Your name isn't even mentioned in any of the launch materials. They're calling Morgan the visionary behind the system." "It's not surprising," I said. "That's how empires are built, on other people's innovations." "What will you do now?" he asked as the elevator arrived. I smiled. "Take some time off. Think about my next move." What I didn't tell David was that my next move had been in motion for months. The day after my departure from Titan, I met with Caroline Wong, my former roommate and now an FBI cybersecurity specialist, at a small cafe 20 miles outside the city. "It's all here," I said, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. Financial records, communications, evidence of market manipulation, witness statements from 3 investment firms Titan pressured, and internal documents detailing how they targeted Lumina and 5 other healthcare startups in the past 3 years. Caroline examined the contents carefully. This is comprehensive. How did you get access to Titan's internal servers? I didn't need to, I replied. Morgan's hubris was always his weakness. He never considered me a threat, so he never restricted my access properly. I was supposed to be teaching their team about Lumina's technology after all. The Securities and Exchange Commission will be very interested in this, Caroline said, returning the documents to the envelope. As will the Department of Justice. What Morgan's been doing goes beyond aggressive business tactics. It's market manipulation and fraud. There's one more thing, I added, passing her a USB drive. Recordings of my conversations with Morgan, including one where he explicitly admits to interfering with Luna's funding to force the acquisition. Caroline raised an eyebrow. Single-party consent state. I nodded. You've been planning this for a while, she observed. Since the day I met him, I confirmed. I knew what he was the moment he approached me at that conference. I just needed to gather enough evidence to ensure it wasn't just my word against his. So you let him acquire your company as a Trojan horse, Caroline said, impressed despite her professional neutrality. Sacrifice Lumina to take down Titan. Not exactly, I replied. Lumina was never the end goal for me, it was just the beginning. 3 weeks later, the headline broke across every major business publication. FBI raids Titan meta sale amid FRAD investigation. The story detailed allegations of systematic market manipulation, investor coercion, and securities fraud. Morgan Harrison's name featured prominently in every article. Titan's stock plummeted 60% in a single day. Trading was eventually halted as the board called an emergency meeting. By that evening, Morgan had been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, feeling not the rush of victory I'd expected, but a quiet sense of justice. The system Morgan had exploited for years was finally working as intended. The following morning, as I was preparing for my scheduled interview with federal prosecutors, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Ms. Reynolds, came the cool, controlled voice I instantly recognized. I believe I underestimated you. Hello, Morgan, I replied, equally calm. Calling from a personal phone? Smart move, considering Titan's lines are probably monitored now. You planned this from the beginning, he said, anger finally breaking through his composure. You sacrificed your own company just to set me up. No, Morgan, you sacrificed my company when you decided it was yours for the taking. I simply ensured there would be consequences. Do you have any idea what you've done? He demanded. Titan employs thousands of people. Their livelihoods will be fine, I interrupted. Titan's technology is sound. The company will survive without you. The board is already distancing themselves, calling you a rogue executive. They'll recover. The silence that followed was telling. Why? He finally asked. Revenge? Money? Accountability, I corrected him. You built your success by destroying others' work. Someone needed to break the pattern. This isn't over, he warned. Actually, Morgan, it is. The FBI has your internal communications, financial records, and testimony from multiple witnesses, and Titan's board will throw you to the wolves to save themselves. I paused. But you should know, this was never just about taking you down. What does that mean? His voice had lost its edge, uncertainty creeping in. Check tomorrow's business news, I replied before ending the call. The next morning, a second headline appeared. Phoenix Medical acquires patient management system from Titan amid SCANDAL. The article detailed how Phoenix Medical, a Titan competitor, had purchased the rights to my patient management system from Titan's desperate board for $180 million, nearly 12 times what Morgan had paid me. What the article didn't mention was that Phoenix's CEO was my former mentor, or that our acquisition talks had been underway for months, contingent on Morgan's removal. It also didn't mention that my contract with Phoenix included both proper credit for my innovation and a significant equity stake in the company. Most importantly, it didn't mention the final clause in our agreement, that Phoenix would establish a $50 million fund to invest in healthcare startups founded by women and minorities, those most often targeted by predatory acquisition practices. 6 months later, I testified at Morgan Harrison's federal trial. He sat at the defense table, the confident posture gone, watching me with a mixture of anger and bewilderment as I methodically described how Titan had systematically undermined Lumina and other startups. As I was leaving the courthouse, David Chen was waiting on the steps. He'd left Titan shortly after the scandal broke and had been cooperating with prosecutors. "You knew," he said as I approached. "You knew all along what would happen." I nodded. "Not everything, but enough." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your reaction needed to be genuine. You were more valuable as an honest witness than as an accomplice." He shook his head, still processing it all. "What happens now?" "Morgan goes to prison. Titan rebuilds under new leadership. The patient management system helps hospitals provide better care, and the investment fund helps ensure the next generation of innovators can't be so easily exploited." "And you?" he asked. I smiled. "I'm starting over, without a target on my back this time." Morgan Harrison was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for securities fraud, market manipulation, and obstruction of justice. Titan Medical survived under new leadership, though its reputation and market position never fully recovered. The patient management system, now correctly credited as my innovation, was implemented in over 200 hospitals nationwide within 2 years, reducing wait times and improving care coordination exactly as I'd envisioned. As for me, I did honor my non-compete agreement technically. I didn't work in healthcare technology for 3 years. Instead, I focused on mentoring other founders, particularly women and minorities, teaching them to recognize predatory business tactics and protect their innovations. When people ask me if I regret letting Lumina be acquired, if I wouldn't have preferred to keep my company and avoid the years of deception, I tell them the truth. Sometimes justice requires sacrifice. Sometimes you have to lose the battle to win the war. Morgan Harrison saw me as an easy target, a female founder he could bully and dismiss. He never considered that I might be playing a longer game, that his own tactics could be used against him. That was the real lesson. In underestimating me, he ensured his own downfall. 3 years to the day after signing that acquisition agreement, I launched my new company, not in healthcare, but in corporate accountability technology. Our first product, AI-driven software that identifies patterns of market manipulation and predatory acquisition strategies. We named it Lumina Justice. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't just exposing the truth. It's changing the system to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Morgan Harrison thought he was acquiring a company, but what he really did was create his own nemesis. He never saw me coming, and neither will those who follow in his footsteps.